Okay, hello everybody, and welcome to this year's SAMBA XP workshop on how to integrate SAMBA Plus for AIX into an existing Active Directory domain. I want to give you a rough overview about how my little workshop is being structured. First of all, I'm gonna show you some basic preparation steps that you should take before installing the packages. After that, we do the basic package installation. Then we make the basic configuration setups, which are required to be done before we join the Active Directory. Yeah, then we will join the Active Directory domain, and after that we will play a little bit around with it and work from a Windows workstation with a test user on it and have a look what can be done. And finally, we will also have a look how some basic troubleshooting can be done on a SAMBA server, so that you can figure out what is going wrong if something is not working as expected. Yes, and last but not least, we can do some questions and answers if you have any questions. Okay, so I'll switch to the IX machine. Okay, here we are. So we are now in the TMP directory. And one of the first things that you should check is have a look how your etc resolve conf looks like. And you should make sure that the name server that you have in your resolve conf is able to resolve the DNS zone of your Active Directory domain. This is important because Windows is using DNS to find out all the information about the domain controllers, which domain controllers, which sites there are, and so on. And the same way, SAMBA and windbind also try to figure out the configuration of the Active Directory, and for that reason, the DNS configuration has to correct. Okay, the second thing that you should check before you make any further steps is have a look how your AIX system is configured regarding the maximum number of allowed groups that a user can be in. You can find out the current value with this little command, ls-atrl -el sys 0 a n groups underscore allowed. And if you didn't make any modifications on this, it will probably tell you that it's 256 numbers of groups allowed. You should raise this value to a much higher value, because in many Windows domains, users are in more than 256 groups. the number of groups that a user is in can grow quite a lot, also because of the reason, because there are nested groups in Windows where groups can be members of other groups. So even if you think that user is just in 20 groups or so, those groups might be member of other groups, and those multiply in the end all to the overall number of groups that the user is in. So we should actually raise this value to the maximum which AIX allows, which is 2048. And you can do that with this command: change def -l sys 0 an groups allowed equals 2048. We're doing this here. And we run the first command again to see if it worked, and it looks good. If you just change this value, and if you're running an LPAR, then you should probably restart with LPAR, because I've seen that this value is only getting effective after an LPAR restart. Okay, those are the requirements that you need to check first. And now let's have a look how to install the SAMBA Plus package. I already downloaded the SAMBA Plus tarball. We are actually distributing our SAMBA Plus package just as a tarball and not as a LP or RPM package, because we don't want to get into this dependency hell that you easily get in on AIX if you install packages from some third party. From my experience, if you install some third-party RPMs like those from IBM or other third-party RPM sources that you can find for AIX, it's a mess. It's a mess from what I can tell, and so we decided to build the SAMBA package with all the dependencies and all the libraries that we require as part of our package. And all you need to do is run the installer of the SAMBA Plus package, which will install everything under user local SAMBA Plus minus version number, and then you're done. You can do that on virtually any AIX box without having to install any extra packages before. So let's unpackage the tarball. And make the installation. So after you untart the SAMBA Plus package, you will find a README file here, which contains the basic installation steps that you need to do, especially if you install it for the first time. So we will now just start with a setup. Script. Yes, we agree. So now it's installing everything under user local SAMBA plus 4.14. So on. Okay, done. Now we have to do what is written here on the last line and also written in the README. We have to install, or we have to make a Zoom link in user local. As you can see, I have a bunch of older SAMBA Plus packages installed here already. So what we need to do is ln-s with our current new SAMBA version and make a Zoom link to SAMBA Plus. All right. Now you can run all the SAMBA commands which are part of this package out of the path user local SAMBA plus /bin or sbin. You probably don't want to type the full path all the time. This is why I recommend to edit the etc environment file and edit the path variable here and add user local SAMBA plus sbin and user local SAMBA plus bin to the path. I've done that already, so I can leave that out now here. And the advantage of this Zoom installing here is you can easily switch between different SAMBA Plus versions. So if there is a new version that you want to install, you can just install it, switch the Zoom link, the SAMBA Plus Zoom link to the new SAMBA Plus version path, restart windbind and SAMBA, and then you're done. If for some reason you want to switch back to the older version, just switch the Zoom link again, restart the services, you're done. That's very convenient. All right. This is the location where the SAMBA Plus program and library files are installed. The actual configuration and SAMBA database files, they are located in var SAMBA Plus here. And whenever you install a new version of SAMBA Plus, this directory will not be changed. So all your configuration will stay as it is. You really just change the version of SAMBA. Anything else is kept. So in the var SAMBA plus etc directory, there is a example smbd.conf, which we will take as base of our configuration that we are going to set up now. So I copied this And now let's edit this. Okay, the realm is the parameter that we need to set here. This is the long domain name. So in our case, it's s.1.site. The workgroup parameter is the NetBIOS domain name, sometimes also called the short domain name. This is s.1. The security equals ADS parameter says that SAMBA is running as a member server in an active directory domain. We leave this as it is. Printcap, this is the typical default of AIX. Leave it as it is. Same. SMB encrypt equals desired. I will comment out this parameter. What it is it actually means that the SAMBA server is telling Windows clients that if they are using SMB3, they should use SMB encryption. So if you want to make your network very secure, you can set this parameter to desired, or you can even enforce encryption so that only encrypted connections are allowed and no unencrypted connections. For this workshop, I will just use unencrypted SMB traffic. The ID map configuration. This is something that I could make a whole workshop on ID map configurations. ID map configuration, what is that generally? You know, in the Windows world, users have no numeric ID like on Unix systems. On Unix systems, you have just a UID number or a GID number for users or groups. In the Windows world, users and groups have ZITs, those fancy strings with start with S, minus, and so on. This ZIT is representing a user or a group, and those ZITs have to be mapped by the windbind daemon to a Unix UID or GID, and vice versa also, of course. And for this mapping between ZIT and UID or GID, for this, the ID mapping configuration is important. The ID mapping is being done by the windbind daemon, and the easiest ID map configuration is ID map TDB, ID map backend TDB. This means that the first Windows user that SAMBA sees is getting mapped, in this case, to the UID 10,000. The second ZIT that the SAMBA user sees, that the SAMBA server sees, is being mapped to the next ID 10,001. The next ID is being mapped to 2002, and so on. It's just filling up and allocating new users and groups starting from 10,000 or whatever range you define here. There are also other ID map modules that you might want to have a look at. For example, ID map backend root, which is also quite nice. With IDmap backend root, you can tell windbind to map the users of a certain domain to a certain range and use the last part of the ZIT, which is called the RIT, the relative identifier. The relative identifier, the RIT, is being added to the lower range of the IDmap RIT range that you configure. And the advantage of this is that you have a consistent mapping of ZITs to Unix IDs. So even if you have multiple SAMBA servers and if you use the same IDmap grid configuration on all the SAMBA servers, this will make sure that you always have the same mappings. That means you have the same Unix UID or GID on all the systems. A third interesting IDmap backend, which also many users like to use, is IDmap backend AD. IDmap backend AD is taking a look at each user's or each group's UID number or GID number attribute, and it uses that number here on the Unix system also. This is a nice thing, but it also requires that you maintain all the UID number and GID numbers in your Active Directory, because if you don't maintain the UID number, GID number attributes in Active Directory for a new user that you just created, for example, then the user will just not work on the SAMBA server, because SAMBA or windbind is not able to retrieve the ID, and that way it can't make a mapping from the ZIT to the Unix user. Okay, we stick here for our little workshop with a default IDmap TDB configuration. And let's go to the next parameter here, the windbind separator. You know, a user in the Windows world looks like domain/user. And by default, it's the same in SAMBA also. But because the backslash character in Unix, especially on the Unix shell, is usually a escape character, and if you want to type actually a backslash, you have to type it always twice on the shell. It might be feasible to just replace the backslash with a plus sign, which I'm doing here. It just makes typing on the shell a little bit more convenient. But it's not a requirement to do that. You can also leave the backslash windbind separator here. The template shell. The template shell is actually the shell that SAMBA user, which is being provided through windbind to the AIX system. This is the shell that that user will get. So you can not only connect to the Samba server via the SMB protocol, but you can also log in via SSH, for example, on the machine, because windbind is providing the Active Directory users to the system through windbind. You don't need to create them in the etc passwd file. The users are being created dynamically through windbind, and they get the shell that is being given here through template. Those socket options here, they are used to enable TCP keyboards. TCP keyboards are a nice thing on the Samba server, because if there is, for example, the case that a user was connected to the Samba server, let's say with his laptop, and when he makes a break and suspends his laptop or just unplugs the network cable, then the SMB connection is still there. It's just idling. But as long as there is nobody telling Samba, hey, this SMB connection is dead, or so, Samba will have no idea that the client went away, that the user unplugged the cable or suspended his machine. So the old connection is still there. That means there might even be some logged files of the user from his previous connection. And if the user comes now back again next morning or whenever, and he connects again, he will get a second SMB connection. The first SMB connection will not go away. And if the user then tries to open a file that he had opened the previous day when he unplugged the cable, he might get an error message that the file is actually being used and cannot be opened now for a second time. And to help you out of that pity that in such a situation, the first SMB connection of that user is being shut down after a short amount of time, you can use those TCP keep alives. That means the TCP stack of the AIX machine will send keep alive packages to the client if the client is idle. And if the keep alive package is not being responded to from the client, then the server will just assume, okay, this is a dead TCP connection, and it will shut down the TCP connection. And when the TCP connection is being shut down, also the SMB connection will be shut down, and also then the files that were logged in that SMB connection will be unlocked again. And when the user comes back next time, you will not run into problems. Okay, then there is another parameter that I would like to add here. It's windbind normalize names equals yes. That parameter makes user and group names which have a space in its name, and this is not uncommon in the Windows world. It will replace the space locally here on the IX system. It will replace it with an underscore. On Linux systems, this is not required, but on AIX systems, this is a good thing to do because AIX doesn't like spaces in usernames or group names. Okay. And here we already have a test TNP share. I will net test, and I will add also another parameter here. I will add VFS object equals AEX CL2. Yeah. What is this? What is this for? VFS objects generally are a way to extend the functionality of the SAMBA file server. And there are a number of VFS objects. For example, also a recycle module where you can store deleted files and many other things. This module here is enabling the NFS4 ACLs. They are available on AIX systems if you use the JFS2 file system. JFS2 is the default file system in AIX. And this is actually a very nice thing that you have NFS4 ACLs available on this platform, because NFS4 ACLs are very, very similar to the Windows NT ACLs. And this way you can store all the permission bits that a Windows client is able to set also natively on an AIX system. And you can also easily edit them on the command line. We'll have a look at that later on also. Okay. That's all for the basic configuration. Let's write and quit the editor. Next thing that we need to do is we want to join the domain. Let's have a look. We have our path set, yes. The tool that we use to join the Active Directory domain is the net command. Net ads join. We don't need to enter the domain name here because we wrote that already in the smbd.conf. But we need to tell it which user to use to join. We use administrator here. So let's see if this works. Yes, it worked. You see, it said joined power to DNS domain sdom1.site. That error messages and that anti-status unsuccessful that you're seeing here This is just coming from the DNS update, which the server tried to do. The machine doesn't have the correct full qualified DNS name. This is why the DNS update didn't work, but we can ignore it. The important part is that the join worked. All right. Now we have a Samba server, which is joined to the domain. And the next thing we should do is start a windbind. Because windbind is that part of Samba which is connecting to the Active Directory and doing all the authentication work and providing the user information from the Active Directory users and groups to the AIX. So now let's go back to the README file once more, because we need to do another step. I almost forgot about that. So we'll read the file again. Yeah, the Zoom linking here of Samba Plus, we did that already. The smbd.conf, we edited this. And the next thing which the README file describes is how you can manage to get windbind and smbd and nmbd. nmbd is, by the way, not really needed anymore. Windbind and smbd is all that you need for member server, for member file server. You need to create those Zoom links in etc rc2.d. So factory and create the Zoom link. Okay, nmbd I just leave out. As mentioned before, it's not really required. Okay. Then we need to tell the AIX system that there is now a windbind module. We need to edit the etc methods CFG file and add these lines. So etc rc, no, etc methods CFG. Let's have a look. I think we already have some lines there. Yeah, we don't need to edit anymore because I did that before. But if you're installing Samba Plus for the first time, you should check that you have those lines here with correct path names and not a windbind section from some previously installed windbind Samba package eventually. This options equals debug line here is also a nice thing if you need to get some debug output. It will generate a debug log in the TMP directory. All right. So let's get back to the README file. So we edited the methods CFG file. And now we also need to enable the authentication part through the change security command. This one. You just call it like this. And that's all actually. So now I think we didn't forget anything now. Now we can start up windbyte first and have a look how this is working. So let's use the local class init windbyte init. Start. Okay, let's have a look if it's running. Yes, windbyte is running. That's nice. Let's have a look if smbd is also running. No, smbd is not running, but we will start smbd also. So smbd is being started. Now let's see if it's running. Oh, yes, it's there. Nice. Okay. We have windbind running. Let's see if it's working properly. The first thing that we use to check if windbind is running and able to communicate with the domain controller is wb-info -t. This will check if the domain controller can be reached and the domain join is correct. Succeeded. This is good. The next thing that we can do is we can let windbind list all the users of the domain. This is being done with a wb-info -u command. I have a very small test domain here where I'm working on. Here you can do that easily. If you have a couple of hundreds of users, you can still do that easily. But if you have a couple of thousands, 10,000s of users or even more, then you shouldn't run this command because it will take quite a while and it will quite put some load on the domain controller also. So in really big domains, this is not a good idea to do. All right. The wb-info -u command was giving back all the domain users. I can do the same with the groups. Also works. All right. Now let's have a look how it looks if we look for the same users, but not just via windbind, but through our AIX system. So ls user is the command, which is the equivalent to getEnd passW on Linux, more or less. ls user s.1 plus administrator. And we have an administrator of the s.1 domain in our AIX system. I will prove you that this user does not exist in the etc passwd file. No administrator there. This user is really just coming through the windbind module dynamically. The same way all the other domain users will be created dynamically by windbind. And yeah, do the same also for a group, for example. And it's group one admins. There you see, even that fancy group is now available on the AIX system. Okay, let's switch to a Windows machine, which is a member of the same Active Directory domain. Here we are. So let's have a look if we can open or if we can connect to the SAMBA server. Our one.site. Now let's switch back to the terminal again. So have a look at our conf more. We want our test share to be right case. This windbind once more. smbd also. And let's try a connection from here via SMB client first. SMB client, I guess you know that this is a client command, also part of SAMBA, which you can use to connect to an SMB share and do many things with that. Okay, works. Our SMB directory, TMP directory, sorry. We can also create a file here, make dir created by quit, and now let's have a look if the file is there. And yes, as you can see, the directory created by SMB client is there. Let's switch back to our Windows client again. It should be working. Now it works. All right. So here's our test share, the TMP directory, and also the created by SMB client. So here we can have a look how the permissions are of this file. Let's have a look at that. So this is how permissions look like here, and I'm gonna edit those, removing everybody and the domain users permissions. I change those. I edit it this way. And currently the permission for domain users on this directory is for this folder only. But what I actually want is an inheritable ACE. So I will say permissions for domain users is for this folder, for subfolders and files. And I will give full control. Except for take ownership, let's say, to the domain users, saying apply, okay, I open the properties again to see if our changes really worked, and yes, looks fine. So now I'm creating another file here, or another folder. I will call it subfolder1, sub1, and have a look how the permissions look like here. So this time, the first ACL entry, the first ACE, isn't here anymore because it wasn't an inheritable ACE. The only inheritable ACE was the one that I changed for domain users. So we also can't edit it at this point because it's actually not editable here because it's inherited. Here we can also see from where it is inherited. It's inherited from this directory. All right. So we'll cancel this. And now I'm creating a text document here, a file. Have a look how the permissions look like here. The same. We only have the inherited ACL component, and this is correctly applied to the file. Okay. So if we go a little bit up here again, and if we now edit the ACL here again, we can add another one. See how this works out. So here we can even choose a different location. The domain that we are joined to here, the sdom1 domain, has also some trusted domains. Let's see if we can also find some users from the trusted domain. No, I think the trust is only in one direction. Probably not in the direction that we want here. But anyway, if we would have a trusted domain here, we can try with an authentication, because if it's a unidirectional trust, then it might work if we enter the username here. Actually, I'm not sure if I know the right password here, but we'll see. Not so bad. So let's add a user from a trusted domain. So something with the trust is not completely right, but you can trust me. If the trust would be right, then we could also add the permissions of a user or group from a trusted domain here and set file or folder permissions for that one. Okay, so we will just now add a user from our domain. Let's say domain admins. Domain admins should get full control for this folder, subfolders, and file. Okay. So that means, again, if we do it for this folder, subfolders, and files, that this is an inheritable permission. We will say apply. and work. I know why it didn't work, because yeah, this is I shot myself into the foot. I removed the change owner permission before, and because I removed the change owner permission, the setting of the permissions now didn't work. So we will just create here on this level a new directory and do it from here again. As you can see, setting and managing ACLs is not always quite straightforward. Created by windbyte. Okay. So we have those defaults here again. We remove everyone again. Now, first thing I'm gonna do is add domain admins with full permissions. Check name, full permission. This folder, subfolders, and file. Okay, and now I'm going to restrict the domain users a little bit and change the permissions to heritable ACEs, full permission minus take ownership. Okay. All right. So now create a folder here. Have a look at the permissions. And as you can see, we have those inheritable permissions here. Domain admins full control, domain users as expected. Okay. So in the new folder, I'm going to create text document again. And I will add another user permission here, another ACE. have a look. I will add myself to that first. Then you can also see that a user which was just created will pop up right away in the IX machine. New user. Ufer. User must not change password at next login. Or here to also here. Okay. See if I can add it here already. Yes, Fufa. Fufa at sdom1.site. Alright. This one has once more. Actually don't know what's wrong with this point. But anyway, we will now just switch to the AX console again and have a look at our ACLs, how they look now after we did those changes. Okay, the directory is created by windclient folder, text document, and we can have a look at the ACLs with the ACL edit command. And because it's NFS for ACLs, we have to tell the ACL edit command -t NFS4 -b, and then this here. With a -v option, you have the nice descriptions here in that file. Otherwise, you would just see the actual permissions down here. Okay. So those are actually exactly the NT ACLs that we could see on the Windows side. And I'm gonna do this. Oh no, let's just edit it, and let's say, for example, we want to remove the domain users from this file here. We just this way. Save and quit. Let's open it more to see. Yeah, change done. And now let's switch back to Windows client. And check that the ACL change is also visible here. And as you can see, it is. So switch back to the terminal again. And edit this once more. And I want to, this is actually exactly the same line that we added before. I don't want this, but instead I want to add foo far this time. With the same permissions as the domain admin. Of course, it says unknown group. Sure, it's not a group, it's a user. Let's replace the G with a U. And then try to save. This worked better. Yeah. Okay, let's switch back to the Windows machine and have a look at the permissions here. And as you can see, the ACL that we changed and where we added the foo far with the full control permissions also appears here. Okay, this is actually a very nice thing that you can edit the NFS4 ACLs on the operating system on the AIX machine directly. This is one advantage that you have over a Linux box where you run Samba on, because on Linux you unfortunately don't have NFS4 ACLs available, and if you want to use the Windows ACLs, you have to use a VFS module for that, and if you use that VFS modules, you don't have any nice possibility to edit the permissions on the command line. So there you are actually forced more or less to edit permissions only from a Windows box. On AX, this is nicely integrated. Yeah. Okay. What else can we have a look at? I think something which is quite helpful for any SAMBA administrator is the debugging and getting useful log output. By the way, here you have this windbind debug log file, but this is actually only from the etc methods CFG windbind module. Here you get some more or less helpful output from that. But what I wanted to show you is how to increase, for example, the log level of a SAMBA process of a certain user or of a certain client machine only, without having to increase the log level for the complete server. Because if you have hundreds of SMB connections, and if you raise the log level then quite high, let's say to 10, this will slow down the complete machine, because all the hundreds of SMB connections will start logging like crazy. And what you actually want to do in a case where you want to debug a problem of a certain user is only increase the log level of that user's client machine. So let's have a look at the log files here first. So by default, smbd is writing all its logs to log.smbd. By the way, the SMB status command, most of you probably know that. With the SMB status command, you can view the currently open SMB connections and the logged files. And here you can also see the IP address of the client that I used to connect to. And this I'm going to use now to make the client-specific logging. I will create a smbd.conf.ip address. Oh, sorry, I just noticed that I didn't change the shared screen. So here we are. So okay, this is the output of SMB status that I was just talking about, and I will create the file etc smbd.conf.ip address of the client machine that I want to have a closer look at. And I will write some extra lines for this client in this file, like log level equals 10 and max log size equals max log size equals 0. That means the log files can grow as large as the file system permits. And I will also say that I want a dedicated log file here. And my dedicated log file should be log file equals var samba plus log percent I, capital I. That means all the log files should go to var samba plus log, and the percent capital I will be replaced with the IP address of the client machine. Okay, so far I just created this smbd.conf file, which I still need to include in the main smbd.conf, because otherwise it will have no effect at all. So I added the smbd.conf here, and at the end of the global section I will include var samba plus etc conf dot percent I. This means the smbd process, when it gets a connection from a client machine, will have a look when it's reading the config file here. If there is a config file which is also called smbd.conf.ip address of the client machine. If there is no such file, it doesn't matter, it will ignore it. But if there is a file like that, we just created it, then this will be included at this point, and the additional parameters will be applied. Okay, let's quit here. And let's restart the smbd process. All right, let's switch back to the Windows client. Yeah. Okay, and I will do things here. Like create another new folder and create another text file. Okay, now let's switch back to the console again. This time I didn't forget to make the switch for you also. And now I hope that we will have a log file. Yes, very nice. Now we have a log file with very verbose logs, log level 10, only for this IP address. Any other client which does not have this IP address will not get such a verbose logging, only this one. So let's have a look. And here you can see this is all the crazy stuff that you will see when you enable log level 10. A lot of crazy stuff. You don't want to go through all of this, but if we have to search for a certain problem, then usually we will ask you to make a log level 10 log, because somewhere deep in this crazy output there is usually something helpful to find. Yeah, this is why debug level 10 is often very helpful. All right. Yeah, I think that's it for now.